Back in 1969, one of the loudest, most aggressive rock bands on the planet decided to pick a fight. But their opponent wasn't another band. It was a massive symphony orchestra. And the battleground, one of the most revered stages in the world, London's Royal Albert Hall. This is the story of the night Deep Purple gambled everything to prove that rock and roll could be art. In 1969, music had walls. On one side, you had the raw, wild energy of rock and roll. On the other, the stuffy, hollow tradition of classical music. They were two separate worlds that pretty much couldn't stand each other. Rock was seen as just noise for teenage rebels. Classical was a relic for the upper crust. Nobody thought they could or even should ever meet. Nobody, that is, except for Jon Lord. If you didn't know, Jon Lord is the classically trained keyboardist for Deep Purple, and he had this wild idea. He dreamed of a new kind of music, a true fusion where the sheer power of a rock band could go head to head with the grandeur of a full orchestra. It wasn't just about adding some strings in the studio like the Moody Blues had done. Lord wanted a living, breathing musical showdown, a full-blown concerto for group and orchestra. It was an idea so completely out there that it was either a stroke of genius or total career. They were creating a new, heavier sound that would soon define hard rock. But before they could release the album In Rock on the World, Jon Lord had to convince them to take this insane gamble. And a move of pure lunatic confidence, their manager went ahead and booked the Royal Albert Hall for September 24th, 1969, without having heard a single note of the music. The clock was officially ticking. Jon Lord had less than 6 months to compose a full 3-part concerto from scratch, all while the band was on a grueling tour schedule. The stage was set for an experiment that would send shockwaves through both the rock and classical worlds. So you take Deep Purple and you stick them in a room with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. On paper, it's a recipe for disaster. The band was loud, improvisational, and ran on pure gut instinct. The orchestra was a highly disciplined machine, a group of musicians who lived and died by the notes on the page. The culture clash was immediate and intense. Even with Deep Purple, not everyone was on board. The guitarist Ritchie Blackmore in particular was not impressed. He later admitted, "I thought it was a total gimmick." He saw the band's future in loud, aggressive rock, but that's not what he worried about. He worried it would become a pretentious side project. He bluntly said, "I couldn't believe we were playing with orchestras. I didn't like playing it." For him, this was Jon Lord's big thing, a detour from the band's real mission. And the orchestra, they weren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. Many of the classical musicians blocked down their notes at these long-haired rockers invading their sacred space. Blackmore recalled that the orchestra was very condescending towards us. Rehearsals were tense. The band played by feel, pushing and pulling the rhythm, while the orchestra was locked into the conductor's steady hand. It often sounded like two completely different pieces of music being played at the same time. There was this big real fear that the whole thing would just collapse into an embarrassing, chaotic mess. This wasn't a friendly collaboration, it was a Cold War on a musical battlefield. But here's the brilliant part. That battle was the whole point. See, Lord didn't write a piece where everyone just holds hands and plays together. He wrote a musical argument, a work built on conflict and resolution. The very structure of the music pitted the group against the orchestra as two opposing forces, each fighting for control of the melody. First movement kicks off with a long dramatic orchestral theme. When the band finally comes crashing in, it's not a polite entrance, it's an interruption. The tension boils over with a blistering, nearly 5-minute guitar solo from Ritchie Blackmore. If you watch the footage from that night, the looks on the faces of the violinists as Blackmore unleashes this torrent of pure raw sound are absolutely priceless. It's a moment of total rock and roll defiance in the very heart of the classical establishment. The second movement offers a kind of truce. It's a calmer, more beautiful section with lyrics written and sung by Ian Gillan. Here the band and orchestra finally find moments of harmony, proving that peace is possible. But that peace doesn't last long. The third movement is, in Lord's own words, a free-for-all. The band and orchestra charge ahead, trading blows and trying to outplay each other. The movement is driven by a thunderous drum solo by Ian Pace, another movement where the raw power of rock and roll just takes over. Lord's genius was forcing these two into warring sides, actually listen and react to each other. And you have to give a massive credit to the conductor, composer, Malcolm Arnold, for somehow holding this fragile alliance together. By the time the final notes echoed through the hall, nobody was sure they'd found common ground or just brought to a standstill. The performance was a landmark moment, not just for Deep Purple, but for all of music. It was a testament to the idea that art had no rules except for the ones we make up. If you're enjoying this musical rebellion, do us a quick favor, hit that subscribe button. Help us bring more deep dives to you like this. On the night of September 24th, 1969, the Royal Albert Hall was buzzing. You could feel this mix of genuine curiosity and serious doubt in the air. The night started with the orchestra performing one of their own pieces, followed by a short powerhouse set from Deep Purple, where they even played an early version of Child in Time. Then after a break, it was time for the main event. As the concerto began, the audience had seen something no one had ever seen before. The reaction when it finished, a moment of stunned silence, then a massive roaring ovation. One critic from Beat Instrumental magazine put it perfectly. It was an act of spontaneous pleasure. Take it from me, there'll be no divorce. But not everyone was sold. The classical world was mostly divisive. One famous review simply said, "The alliance of pop and symphony last night leaves me with one recommendation: divorce by consent." And within the band, the prize of success just made the creative spirit even wider. For Ritchie Blackmore, the concerto was a distraction. He'd reportedly told Jon Lord that this was a showdown between the classical project and the heavy rock numbers he was writing. The live album, released a few months later, was a hit. But Blackmore ultimately got his wish. The band's very next album was Deep Purple in Rock, a monster of a record that basically blew up the bridge to the symphonic world and set the course for the future as hard rock titans. And I will be doing a video on that pretty soon. Even though the band quickly moved on, the Concerto for Group and Orchestra kicked the door wide open and proved that a rock band could think on the same epic scale as a symphony, pioneering a genre fusion that would pop up again and again for decades. In the 1970s, it inspired a wave of progressive rock bands like The Nice and Procol Harum to start incorporating orchestras into the sound, making symphonic rock a defining part of the prog scene. But maybe the concerto's biggest legacy showed up decades later in an even heavier genre, which is heavy metal, or metal in general. In 1999, Metallica teamed up with the San Francisco Symphony for the legendary S&M album. It was a global smash hit, and the DNA traces directly back to that wild night at the Albert Hall. After that, the floodgates were open. Bands from the Scorpions to Nightwish and Epica had made their fusion of metal and orchestra their signature sound. That 1969 concert is now seen as the origin point, the first major event that proved the raw power of heavy rock could be amplified, not weakened, by the majesty of an orchestra. The craziest part, about 30 years later, when Lord wanted to perform the concerto again, they realized the original score was gone, vanished, and had to be painstakingly recreated by a fan who transcribed the entire thing from just watching the 1969 video. This led to a triumphant return to the Royal Albert Hall in 1999, and in 2012, the very last project Jon Lord completed before his death was the first ever definitive studio recording of the masterpiece he had dreamed up over 40 years earlier. The night Deep Purple battled the symphony was so much more than a concert. It was a declaration of independence. It was a high-risk, high-reward gamble born from the simple belief that music should have no borders. Jon Lord, a man with a foot in two completely different worlds, dared to smash them together. He pitted the wild heart of a rock band against the disciplined might of an orchestra, and in doing so, created something totally new. It wasn't a clear victory for either side. It was a chaotic, beautiful, and sometimes messy clash that proved both worlds had something powerful to offer. It gave rock a new level of ambition, proving it could be as epic and sophisticated as any symphony. Deep Purple took a massive risk, and that one moment of artistic courage didn't just play music, they made history. So what do you think? Was the concerto a masterpiece or a pretentious mess? Check out this playlist with more Deep Purple reviews. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.